Did you hear the news? Metro PCS is now Metro by T-Mobile. Now you get new plans with unlimited high-speed data all month long, all on the T-Mobile network. Check out the new Metro by T-Mobile today and discover the smarter way to get unlimited. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. During congestion, the fraction of customers using greater than 35 gigs per month may notice reduced speeds, and Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video streams at 480p. Coverage not available in some areas. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Cultural Stew Moments of Influence. My name is Ron Harkins Jr., and I am here today with my next guest, Cara D'Emanuele. Cara and I have known each other since 2002. When I was cast in my first musical for Blackfriars Theater, when I came back after serving a mission in Utah. I was a scrawny little kid, didn't know what I was getting into. All I know is I wanted to get back on stage, and here was Cara, the musical director. And Cara, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, first of all, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for asking me. I am a voice coach, an acting coach, and a casting director. And I also work as an actor and a singer myself. And I've been here in Rochester for almost 18 years and really, love living in upstate New York. It's close enough to New York, where my kids are, and I get to travel there and see shows. And but I like living in I like living upstate. I'm originally from the Syracuse area, so it feels like home. But there's a lot going on in Rochester, and I work in Syracuse as well, and really enjoying working with different theater companies and film companies, and with different actors. I coach children and teens and adults. So yeah, that's what I do. Thank you.
And, I mentioned that, Cara was not only influential in getting me my first role at Blackfriars Theater in general, but Cara was also influential in our wedding. She actually sang at our wedding and was influential in basically me and my wife meeting each other. So it's been a long connection. It's been a good connection. Cara decided that she would like to talk about the movie Kramer versus Kramer, a movie that I have not seen in a while, but Cara is very familiar with this. It is directed and written by Robert Benton. It's written based on a novel by Avery Corman. It stars Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep. It had 9 nominations and 5 wins, and one for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, and of course, Best Actor and Best Supporting Actress for Streep. Cara, tell me a little about this film.
Well, I saw this film when I was in 9th grade many moons ago. So it came out in December of 79. So I'm imagining that when I saw it was probably January of 1980, something like that, January, February. I went to a little movie theater in Pulaski, New York. I'm from the big booming metropolis of Mexico, New York, with 2 stoplights. And I went with my church youth group. We did, there wasn't a lot to do. It just wasn't like kids grow up now.
Quite the movie to see with a church youth group.
Well, yeah. Okay. We saw lots of films, and actually, this was pretty tame. Actually, when I think back to some of the films that we saw, but yeah, we did great things, and again, growing up in a small town, I was really fortunate. My parents afforded me opportunities outside of Mexico. I took dance lessons, I took piano lessons, I took gymnastics, but most kids growing up, we did things that were just in our town. People played football or baseball, or they were in the marching band. And that's, kind of how you grew up. You played in your backyard. You went over to your grandmother's house and made jam. It really was like that in the 1970s and 80s. not a lot to do. So going to the movies in a movie theater was huge. So in 1980, thinking back, I probably at that point had only seen maybe 3 or 4 movies in my entire life on a big screen. And I remember one of those was Bedknobs and Broomsticks. So I am really dating myself now. But, I remember my mom and my grandmother taking my brother and sister and I to a couple of films, and I don't remember what they were. Snow White may have been one of them, but I know Bedknobs and Broomsticks. And at any rate, so going, on a Sunday afternoon after church with my church youth group to see Kramer versus Kramer. And I just remember it being the most visceral experience that I had at that point in my life. Yeah, being a 9th grader.
Tell me a little bit about what the movie is about.
So yeah, Kramer versus Kramer is about this married couple. Joanna Kramer is played by Meryl Streep, and Ted Kramer is played by Dustin Hoffman, and they have a young son, Billy, and it's about divorce and what happens to a family. And really, if I had to choose one word to describe what I feel the entire film is about, it's vulnerability. And, that influence, that has influenced me greatly. I remember every detail of that day. I remember what I was wearing. I remember the popcorn that I had. And it was absolutely a pivotal day in my life because of that film.
And that film came along in a time when there was a cultural shift going on between how the typical mother and father relationship and how a family core was viewed, and how much of a stigma divorce was in our society. And it opened up that discussion for, well, what happens with a divorce, and, should people be sticking through a relationship that is, abusive, and where it goes on that. What really stuck out to you that now you're looking back at it is what draws you back to that film?
It was Meryl Streep's performance. Yeah. Her tears and her, portrayal of this woman who thought she wanted one thing, but then realized that she thought she wanted to be married to this man, and she thought she wanted to be a mother, as defined by what society thought a mother should be at that point. And she really realized that was not fulfilling for her. And she was going to be no good to herself, her husband, to their marriage, or to their child, being as unhappy as she was. And yeah.
So here's Meryl, and she just is basically at the start of her film career. I think it was her 3rd film, but her first major, this is my coming out movie. She gets that nomination for it. And one of the things that struck me about that was she had this great line. She said when she saw Taxi Driver, was that 75, 76?
Sounds right.
She made the remark about Robert De Niro, and she said, that's what I want to do. That's the actor I want to be when I grow up. And here she is going into this year with her 21st, 23rd nomination. But it all kicked off with what she put out in that film.
Yeah. It was, she just showed so much range. And again, I go back to that term visceral, and I use that as an acting coach a lot about, just acting from your cells. Like you can feel that come across the screen. Same thing when I see a very influential stage actor, or I see a performance, or I hear the human voice. I even, I hear a 7-year-old singing something, and it affects me in that same way. But it was something very, very specific about this performance, about Meryl's performance, that made me realize I want to be an actor. I'm going to be up on that screen someday, and I don't know how to do it. You know, I was in a small town. You were in the marching band. That was it. And I was a great singer. I was really a natural singer. I was a very natural musician. And the only thing, nobody ever talked to me about going to school to become an actor. I was going to be a music teacher. That, you know, that's the performing that I knew. I sang in church. I did, you know, maybe there were Christmas pageants or something like that, but I had never been exposed to acting. No one ever said to me, you know, you can go to Carnegie Mellon, or you can go to Juilliard, or, you know, people actually study how to do this. I think I would have been blown away that was an option. So it wasn't until I was kind of out in the world and away from my small town that I realized, like, wait a second, like, people actually study this. Oh, that's how you get to, you know, to that point. And so that's where I really started making the journey from music into musical theater, which is where I really ended up doing most of my undergraduate and graduate work was in musical theater. And then now as an adult is really when I've started training as an actor and training other actors.
So tapping back into that movie just for another second here. So you mentioned about being visceral and being real and how much that Meryl brought to that. And there's, I want to say stories, but I mean, they're true facts of what happened. And this was a movie where Meryl she really defined who she was going to be, because she put her foot down when she read the script, and she didn't agree with what she was reading the script as for her character. And she talked with the director, and they rewrote the things, and she actually had Meryl rewriting her lines and making them real. She researched with her mother and talked with her mother about, let's make this character real, and how do I become that? And on the other side of that fence, you have Dustin, he's kind of solidified who he was in Hollywood at this point, a very method actor.
Absolutely.
And so you have this method actor going against somebody who's trying to be very raw and real, but she's not disappearing into that in the way that Dustin. There was a famous scene where he literally smacked her, and it was real. How do you approach those different ways into acting? I mean, do you follow down that line of being a method actor where you just envelop yourself so much that it becomes who you are? Or do you let yourself become who the character, or I'm not phrasing that right, or do you let the character become part of you in the way that you actually can be identified as that character, whereas the character is more identified as you?
Sure. Yeah, you know, this conversation has been very relevant in my life as a coach and a casting director and as an actor in recent months. This question has been posed to me several times about different methods and the method, or, you know, Stanislavski, or you know, studying with Uta Hagen or Sanford Meisner. What, you know, how does that differ? You know, how do the methodologies differ, and how do you decide what you want to study, and how, you know, and I think it's just a little bit of everything. What works for me as an actor is transference. For instance, if I'm working on a scene, now I am divorced, so I could totally relate to, you know, divorce and how it tears apart a family and what happens to children and all of that. But, you know, there are situations that, you know, I've played a character where nothing like that has happened to me, but I try to find something that's similar. And I teach my actors that as well. You know, for instance, maybe when I work with young actors and we're working with really heavy material, say for instance, it's a scene about sexual molestation or something, you know, very dark like that. The teens that I'm working with, hopefully something like that has never happened to them. But when you break it down and you realize what that really is, it's a loss of control. So we talk about, well, what other situations have you been in where you've experienced a loss of control? And then we transfer that onto the scene. And that's kind of how I work. So I would say it, for me personally, it's not, I'm not working in one methodology. I think it's, you find what works for you. And I know that there are some actors who are religious about staying with the one methodology that they have learned. And I'm not sure that it obviously works for people who have been really super successful. But I'm not sure that works, for everybody.
And, I've been able to get on stage a couple times, and I'm mainly a background person, but the thing that's stuck with me through and what I've been taught through the years and that I've been most grateful is just, being true and letting you meld with whoever that character is. So it's not a character that you're doing. You're not going up there and playing Mickey Mouse, right, where it's so like over the top, but grounding it in reality, whether it be something that you actually have gone through, mm-hmm, or it's something similar to an experience that you've gone through, so that it has a root and it has
authenticity.
A feeling.
Yeah, that's absolutely what you're going for. Realism. It's our job as actors, as storytellers. We are storytellers. It is our job to create authentic, realistic characters that an audience, we need to be believable. So how we get there is our own business, I guess. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely,
when it comes to, you're going to work with your coach, you're going to, spend time, doing your own research, whatever it is. And there are these incredible actors like Meryl Streep, of course, and Daniel Day-Lewis, who, or Philip Seymour Hoffman, of course. And they're just known for living, eating, breathing, sleeping, becoming, even physically, becoming the characters that they're playing. And that's what I love about the opportunity to tell these stories in the way that I do on stage and on screen is to be able to express myself, viscerally and authentically, and and it's so cathartic. It is so absolutely cathartic for things that have happened in your life that you've wanted to say to somebody, or and I'm a pretty say it like it is kind of girl, so I've probably said everything I want to say.
You don't say.
But yeah, playing these characters certainly is very cathartic. And I think going back to Kramer versus Kramer, Meryl's tears, that's what got me. It was just something about watching her cry and watching her crumble in front of you, in front of the camera, and knowing that was what was supposed to happen in the storytelling. Yeah.
So you take yourself from being a young kid in Mexico. You see this movie Kramer, and it sets you down this path of theater and eventually musical theater. And what have been those roles over the years that have touched you in a way that they stand out above the other roles? I mean, I want to say your favorite roles, but that's not always, right. We maybe have fun playing a role, but it may not touch us in the way, but in a way that you can relate to, like, that Meryl Streep moment, this was how I felt doing this role.
I think, the first thing that comes to mind is when I played Weezer in Steel Magnolias. And, you wouldn't think of that as being deep, because she's the loudmouth, and she kind of lives, Weezer lives on the outside. Everything's just out there and big, and she wears everything on her sleeve, and she just tells people, what is. But all of that comes from what has happened to her. It comes from her past. It comes from insecure. She has insecurities, but I think she's just at a point in her life where, you get to a point. I'll be 53 soon, and even now, you take less from people. You care less about what people think, their opinions, and needing validation. And I think that was really fun for me, playing Weezer and realizing that she felt comfortable in her own skin. And, but boy, those women were so passionate about their friendship. And that was real, and that is authentic. And that doesn't matter if you're big and boisterous or you're more demure. It's real, it's genuine. And I really loved exploring all of that in that play, which is one of the most well-written things I've ever worked on. I really enjoy that.
If you were to put your finger on a film that came out in the last couple of years that you would highly suggest that somebody go see, to see, that's what acting's about.
Right.
What would you say?
Can it be not within the last couple of years? Can it
Sure.
be contemporary?
Yep.
Okay. So the example that I always go to is Capote. And, I don't watch a film now that I don't do a ton of research after I see the film. I will go home and read anything that I can, get my hands on. I will watch any kind of interviews that have been done with the actor, the directors, the artistic team. And God, I loved the stories that Philip told about becoming this character. And, he was a big guy. He was a big guy, big boned, big guy. And, for him to have physically become Truman Capote was just an amazing feat. And, just what he was able to create and the versatility that he had as an actor, in general, but with that role specifically. That's one that I will, right off the bat with my adult acting classes, I will say, if you have not seen this film, that's the first one that you need to go home and watch.
If somebody came up to you right now, standing at the crux of their life, deciding to go down that path of being an actor, what would you embark upon them and advice?
My advice would be, I would first ask them, how serious are you? Do you realize what this really takes? And I would ask them, when you talk about wanting to be an actor, do you mean an actor within your community? Do you mean a semi-professional actor that does some paying work, whatever? Or do you mean I am all in? I will give up anything. I want to be in LA. I want to be in New York, and I help actors to kind of look at the trajectory. Where do you want to be in a year? Where do you want to be in 3 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Are you in a position financially that you can make some sacrifices? What's happening with your children? Are you married? You have to think about the realities of life, because it isn't just about, I want to become an actor. It's, well, how am I going to pay for classes? How am I going to pay for my headshots? How am I going to take time off to go to Pittsburgh for, an audition or, whatever? I really like to talk to somebody about what are the realities and what do you really mean? And do you understand the sacrifice? And it's also not about talent. It's about the lifestyle. You have to have both. So when somebody says, my husband is an amazing actor, yeah, okay, I might go to see them in a play and they were phenomenal, or a child, oh God, they're better than anybody on American Idol or, whatever. And we want them to have all these opportunities. We want them to have a Nickelodeon show. We want to do, and I'm like, you can't even drive into the city after dark. You don't even like to come to my studio in Rochester on Park Avenue. And, so you have to understand that it's not just the talent and the work, it's the lifestyle. It's all of those things combined. So are you ready for that? you know, and it's sacrifice. It absolutely is. And I sit here today and can tell you that I absolutely, you know, lost my marriage to this business. That's reality. You gotta know. You've got to know what you're sacrificing. But I don't have any regrets. I don't have any regrets at all.
And it goes back to like, to be an actor, you got to know yourself.
Absolutely.
And if you know yourself, then you know how far you're going to sacrifice.
Absolutely. And that goes back to Kramer versus Kramer. That goes back to, you know, some of her dialogue talks about, if I don't leave now, you're going to come back. You know, she says to her husband, he's, you know, not paying attention to her, of course, you know, and he's off doing and he's doing really well in his company. You know, he works in advertising and you know, he's kind of trying to shush her when she's saying, I'm leaving you, Ted, I'm leaving you. Here are the keys. Here's the dry cleaning bill. You have to pick up Billy after school tomorrow. There's a birthday party, blah, 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 right? I'm leaving. And he's like, what do you mean? You know, stop joking around. And she's like, if I don't do this now, you're going to come back in a week or a month or a year. And I've jumped out the window, you know? And then she explains in a letter later to Billy, you know, why she needed to leave. And it's, you know, it's kind of about knowing that I want to be your mommy. I just can't be your mommy every day. I'm not, I think the quote is, I'll be your, I'm going to cry. I'll be your mom in your heart, but I won't be your mom at home. Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. It's knowing yourself. You're absolutely right. And being willing to be vulnerable enough to say that, and vulnerable enough in front of an audience.
I that has been very key to me, is just like being willing to cut yourself open and put yourself out there. And it's exposing who you are, and whether you fail or whether you succeed, how that shapes where you're going to go.
Yeah. And I think it's really hard as social media has become so prevalent in our lives, and how instant gratification is the big, you know, everybody's mantra, you know, like, am I going to get it now? You know, and how do I look in this, you know, picture, and how, you know, and everybody's comparing themselves to everyone. And, you know, I think we do have to get back to authenticity somehow, and saying it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to, you know, be who you are. And I mean, this is really relevant to my life right now. I am the very proud mother of a transgender son. I brought up a daughter, but there was not 1 second after he told me that this is what, you know, he had decided to do, that I ever said, wow, I never saw that coming. Of course I saw it coming, you know? And so it is about opening yourself up and putting yourself out there. And I applaud people who are able to do that. And I think our society is becoming much more open to that. Just like even when you said in the beginning of the interview, there was a time when divorce was not acceptable. You know, look how far we've come now. You know, if you're not from a divorced family, you know, you're in the minority.
I mean, I just had the same, and we're going to wrap up here in a second. I just had the same discussion with somebody the other day, and we literally talked for 2 hours. You know, he's on one side of the fence, I'm on the other side of the fence. And the one thing he kept trying to brag back, he's like, it's the degradation of morals in our society. And I'm like, I think it's the shift of people finally accepting the fact that we can actually be true to who we are.
And coexist. Yes.
And you have people that don't want that and like hiding behind this facade of everything is peaches and roses and picket fences. And this other group is growing up, and I'm grateful my kid is growing up right now, because they're growing up in a society where they will be accepted for whoever they are and whatever they do, and they won't be judged for it. And
yeah,
it's quite a shift, and it's happened within the past like 10, 15 years in like rapid succession.
Absolutely.
Cara, I'd like to thank you very much for joining me today. Cara, if somebody wanted to find you, stalk you,
Yeah.
where could they find you?
Well, I have a website, carademanuele.com. So that's where, I would go, or Google me. You'll definitely be able to find me.
Thank you. And as always, you can find me as at GF Media or at GF Media CEO pretty much everywhere. You can find us on culturalstew.net, culturalstew.net on Twitter, or Cultural Stew on Facebook. Thank you. Catch you at the next episode. What you've heard? Want to continue to hear more? Please consider Patreon. What is Patreon, you ask? Patreon is a content creator support site, a way for people to support the things they love and allow creators to continue creating the content that they love. Please consider heading over to patreon.com/gfmedia and becoming a Patreon supporter today.
Did you hear the news? Metro PCS is now Metro by T-Mobile. Now you get new plans with unlimited high-speed data all month long, all on the T-Mobile network. Check out the new Metro by T-Mobile today and discover the smarter way to get unlimited. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. During congestion, the fraction of customers using greater than 35 gigs per month may notice reduced speeds, and Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video streams at 480p. Coverage not available in some areas. See store for details and terms and conditions.